Good morning, everyone. This is Joe Mizzi, and I'm delighted today to be able to introduce you to Meagan Hengst. A lot of the trainers here in Michigan already know Meagan very well because she starts a lot of colts up here. And for those of you out of state, you might want to listen to this because Meagan has had great success on starting colts. Meagan's an accomplished horsewoman. She's done everything from breeding to showing pleasure to barrel racing, and of course the colt starting. And she does a wonderful job with the baby. So Meagan, thank you very much for taking time to talk with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So Meagan, the members of our club, a lot of the members have asked me over the years about handling babies, usually up to the age of 1. A lot of people have done some breeding on their own and they're not really sure what they should be doing with their babies. And they want to know what they should be working on in order to get the babies ready to transition to starting their training career. And the question I have for you is, what should people be doing with their babies? What should they be working on?
Sure, that's a great question. So with the babies, we want to get them used to handling all over and getting them used to our human touch. So we do a lot of the handling and infancy from day 1 when they're born. And I think, that training process starts from day 1 when those babies are born. And if we don't take that time to start getting them used to, the minimal, just hand walking and walking, way in towards mom, and just kind of yielding to pressure and starting very minimal at a young age, and we kind of build upon that. Then when we get to the weaning process, on our farm we have a bunch of patient poles. What
is a patient's pole, Meagan, for those that don't know?
Sure. So patient poles, the ones that I use, I got from Texas a few years back, and they're 10 foot tall, and then on the top they have a swivel, and it's a really user-friendly system for the young horses to learn where they don't get claustrophobic. And so when a horse is learning to tie, they can circle around that pole for hours until they kind of learn to relax on it. And as soon as they stand, all 4 feet and they kind of start to relax, then we take them off of it and we reward them off of that, positive relaxation coming off the pole. And we slowly build on that. So when they're learning how to stand on the pole, sometimes the first day is only 3 minutes, 10 minutes, and we eventually build upon that, where the horses, when they go to the pole, it's a space of relaxation where they know, they can go to it, and that's kind of their relaxing time. So when I get up to the point where we start them under saddle, I have a whole line of them, and we kind of cycle in, and they'll go there before their workout. I'll put them up there during the workout and a little bit after the workout, where the horses are not just being pulled into work and putting straight back outside, where they have that time before and after and during to kind of process and learn to be independent in their thinking instead of codependent on us.
Yep, I read a book not that long ago that was written by Cleve Wells, and one of the things he talked about was the importance of teaching your young horses to be patient. So that's exactly what you're talking about here.
Absolutely. And then, another huge thing that I do, which I think can oftentimes be overlooked, but I do think the horse world is evolving and seeing the importance of groundwork. I am a huge believer of groundwork and desensitizing and exposing these horses starting from a really young age. So the babies, when we get them weaned, I'll hand walk them off the farm. We have a bunch of trails by us, where they can be exposed to tractors around them. We're close to an airport, so there's a lot of low planes, dogs running around, and where they can begin to be in a relaxed state while being exposed to, new things around, and that's going to translate to when we start to, add different exposure for when we start them under saddle. And another way I do that too is with the babies, they all learn how to pony. So with my older horses, I always want to make sure that I have a really good pony horse that's a good influence for the babies. So a nice quiet horse, calm, and we dally up to the horn and we go on a trail ride where they can have that good influence of an adult horse where they're very relaxed when deer run out in front of us, or turkey, and being exposed to the outside world is really important, where they begin to enjoy being with us and they begin to enjoy their workout, where coming out to work with us isn't a job, it isn't a chore, where they look forward to the work.
Sure. Those pony horses are great, aren't they? We were just talking yesterday to Monica Webb, and she was talking about the importance of ponying the young horses. And we used to have a pony horse here that we would use, and they're worth their weight in gold, those patient old geldings.
Oh, they are, absolutely. And ponying also, with the babies and starting them at pressure, we want to start to teach them how to yield to pressure. And that can just be starting very minimally on the ground where we, ask them to bring their head down so they feel the pressure behind their ears in the whole area, flexing laterally side to side toward their flank, and then also back. And so when we pony a horse or when we tie them on the patient pole, when we can learn the horse that, hey, when you feel this pressure behind your ears to come up, then there's that releasing the pressure. So they learn where that happy spot is, and until we've established that in the groundwork in the arena, that's where a lot of people, they have horses that pull back at the patient pole, or they have, ones that want to not back off the trailer. And so it all goes back to having a really solid foundation with those babies where, we don't have that foundation to go back on. That's where you have horses that do pull back at patient poles because they're never able to learn and process how to come in and respond to that pressure that's being applied to them.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. When after you've had a baby for a while, at what point, when they make it to be a yearling, at what point do you actually consider it to be in training?
Sorry, you broke up a little bit there. At what point do what?
When a horse is a yearling, at what point do you actually consider it to be quote unquote in training?
I think the training starts from day one, but as a yearling, they all learn how to lunge, but I also want to be minimized with lunging with the babies, so we're not causing unnecessary stress on their joints because the babies are still developing.
Yeah.
So I am a firm believer on the babies learning how to lunge and how to yield their haunches, and learning how to side tap on the wall and all of the fundamentals that we want these horses to learn. But I'm also a firm believer in the opposite direction where their joints are still developing,
right,
and both physically and mentally. So I want them to learn how to lunge as late weanlings up to their yearling year, but I also do it incrementally where, we do it consistently for maybe 3 weeks, and then they get a month off. And we kind of break it up where they can have a chance to process it both physically and mentally, where we're not putting too much stress on their joints. Because,
right.
Unfortunately, we do see a lot of horses break down so soon, and I think it can be caused by pushing them a little too early at a young age.
Sure. Yeah. No, I've always appreciated your patience in working with the young ones, because not every horse develops at the same pace, either physically or mentally, and you just have to be sensitive to that and read the horse. And I think you do a great job at that.
Thank you.
So when you've had a horse and you've got them to be patient, they're standing still and they're growing up, and it's now time to think about their very first ride. When do you know that a horse is ready for its first ride?
Well, that's a broad question, which I'm sure you know. It's a learning curve, and it's just a case where horse training there's just no one size fits all, right? So that's where we kind of have to adjust to the individual. And my number one thing that I look for when I work with a colt is relaxation. I think that's your number one step, is to have that horse relaxed.
Yeah.
And most horses that have anxiety or certain issues, it all goes back to when methods or techniques were being taught, they were unable to retain any of it because we have them in a state of, unless we have them in that state of relaxation, they're unable to retain it.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we get them in that state of relaxation where they can process that information that we're translating to them and understand it.
Yep, and you and I know they don't all respond that way.
No, they don't. And they're all kind of on their own different time frame, and so that's where you have to adjust to the individual. So we, with my desensitizing on the ground, I do a lot of exposure with the babies outside, hand walking, the toning, and then we do all of the turf work. They go in the pools. We have a whole system of desensitizing in the arena, but it just kind of depends on the individual. And then when we do get them to that point, my first ride that I typically do on them is bareback in a halter, and it's just kind of laying over their body, getting them used to, my weight being distributed in different areas. And it's not just about getting on and going with these colts. It's about creating that good experience where they are trusting of me on their back.
Right.
And they're not in a scared position. So it's just very slow and making it a little bit more methodical instead of having such an agenda with starting horses,
Sure.
creating that trust. And when you have that trust, it's going to go that much faster and quicker because, they're not going to get insecure with us.
Right.
So as soon as we can establish that trust and relaxation, it usually goes pretty quickly.
Yeah. No, that's great. So when you're getting a horse started, what are the things that you're trying to accomplish with a horse? You've kind of touched on some of these already, but eventually you're going to turn these horses over to their show trainer, if you will. And what are the things that you want to accomplish before you do that? Or does the trainer give you expectations on what they want done, or how does that work exactly?
Sure. I do try to adjust to the client's needs. My number one thing when I have a colt come in here for training is creating a safe ride for them to go home. So I know that you are familiar with me taking the horses out with exposure, but for those who are listening who are not familiar, we live close to Lake Michigan, and so typically when I get about 5 rides on a colt, and when I feel, quote, safe, where I just have the essentials. I have my one race stop, walk shot lope both ways, and they're really trusting on the back. Then my next phase is I have a friend ride with me on one of those good old horses that is really quiet on the trails, and we do it's about a 3.5-hour ride to Lake Michigan, and for me it's about that full immersion for the colt, and connecting their minds with their feet. And it's really getting these babies to think about where they're stepping, because they can overthink things very quick and get very mental, whereas if we can get their head, that out of their head and connecting their mind with their feet, it's huge. So on this beach ride that I do with the babies, we ride for 3.5 hours down the road with motorcycles, semis, up steep dunes, down the other side, and then they go swimming in Lake Michigan. And we usually get them deep enough where they're doing a full swim. And that's typically on about their 5th ride total. And after that ride, when we get home, we have the brokest horses, and then we can build from there. That's when the fun starts, where we can start to teach them things about their haunches and get a little bit more precise with what we're working on.
Yeah, I've seen you do that, and until you've actually seen it, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, the horses do. There is a definite difference after they've done that, and I think it's a great thing to do, because you get them outside of that regimen of just being in the arena and working and all that. I think it just opens them up and understanding that this is fun, I think that's huge.
Absolutely.
For them. Yeah. Plus, it's
where they're looking forward to their work. It's really important. And going back to the basics of getting a horse comfortable before we get them under saddle. A lot of horses, that kind of how I started to build my name years ago, was a lot of horses have come to me kind of as a last resort, where a lot of owners have wanted to give up on them, and they've just kind of run out of options. But a lot of places haven't taught the owners, and it's due to no fault of their own, but just lack of, exposure or education on their behalf on how to take a different approach with these horses. And an example of that is one 2-year-old that came into me a few years ago. She was a big 2-year-old. She was about 16 hands. And the owner walked her in, and we were walking in the aisle, and we each had a 2-year-old walking our own, and I heard a little scuffle behind me, and all of a sudden the 2-year-old just plowed through the owner and got loose and ran into the indoor arena, kind of skidded on the cement floor, but the 2-year-old just had learned no basics or fundamentals or how to give into that pressure, so she was kind of able to run through her owner's pressure since a baby, and especially when they get that big. So, that just goes back to working with them as foals and yearlings, and moving up to their 2-year-old years. We can establish some of that before they're 16 hands. It's huge, but then also going backward is so much more of a process than going forwards. When we get ones with issues like that, you have to revert some of that before we can make progress. So it's kind of retraining them in a sense.
Right, exactly. Well, that's all great advice, Meagan. All of these things are important for people, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about these things. One question I've asked a lot of the trainers, and I want to ask you, what are some of the things that you like to do outside of the horse world?
Outside of horses, I'm an outdoorsy person, so I'm a huge cattle boarder. Like I said, we live close to Lake Michigan, so I have a couple French bulldogs, and they go on the paddle board with me, so we're out on the lake a lot on the nice days, and then traveling and, just visiting some friends, but really outdoorsy person, which most horse trainers are. We want to be outside with our animals and, just enjoying nature.
Yeah, that's great. So, Meagan, if someone wants to get in touch with you about starting their horses, what's the best way for them to do that?
We do have a Facebook page under Fieldstone Farm, and that's in Holland, Michigan. Or